So, we're not at the end of this process. But there is a sense, I think, by the members, those countries in the area, I think we can say the euro has been a shield to them during the crisis, and public support for the euro in the candidate countries, that is those who have got an obligation to adopt the euro but haven't yet done so, has probably increased. So what we see from the candidate countries then is that the longer-run benefits of membership in the eurozone are clear. The crisis has, if anything, on balance, strengthened the case for being in the eurozone, but it's also made the perils of the transition process rather clearer. So how do we get... It's fine to say we'd all love to be in the zone, but how do we get there? So let's just run briefly through the membership tests. These are the five main Maastricht tests: price stability, low interest rates, fiscal deficit, public debt ratios below 60%, exchange or going in a downward path, and exchange rate stability. Now, all these criteria which have to be fulfilled for Maastricht are clearly in the interests of the countries involved. There's no conflict between the Maastricht criteria and what is good economic policy in the candidate countries. But there are some problems with the way the tests are run. And here I wanted to go through what I saw as some of the major difficulties on the tests. Firstly, the price stability target has become harder to achieve, and that is partly because of the way it's defined. It's defined in terms of other EU members, not just in terms of stability, low inflation in Eurozone countries. As we know, Lithuania failed to meet the test because two of the three countries it was being measured against, Sweden and Poland, were doing very well on the inflation front, but weren't even in the Eurozone. So that's one problem there. As we know, real appreciation can be expected. Minister Rostovsky mentioned this point over the long term. So that we've always known that has been a challenge for candidate countries. And it's more difficult to achieve the price stability target in a deflationary environment in the Union. So I think those are difficulties on the price stability target. On the fiscal and debt targets, more Eurozone members are now in breach of the targets than are not. This was again a point made by Minister Rostovsky about the number of countries with excessive deficit procedures at the moment. And I think there's a real question about whether candidate countries should be held to a higher standard than those of the existing members, particularly when everyone has been hit by a common shock here in terms of the crisis. And finally, what I think is a very serious problem is that the ERM to be in the ERM2 for 2 years as a test for stability on the exchange rate really sets the country up for speculative attack. This is the most difficult, very difficult transition. And I think we see lots of market speculation on whether countries have met the criteria. And we also see the exchange arrangement itself, the pegging arrangement, contributing to real appreciation and to upward price pressures in the country as, if you like, convergence is anticipated. So if we were reconsidering the tests, what would we do? Now, it may be that we just take the line that all consideration of these tests should be ruled out on political and institutional grounds. I think Professor Filar made the point that the strong view of the Commission is absolutely no question about any change in anything here. Okay, that may be true, but Minister Rostovsky mentioned the fact that we may have to start thinking the Stability and Growth Pact framework in the current circumstances, and perhaps we need as economists also to try and see what might be done better in the world. And I think there are two things one would look for if one were trying to modify the tests. And one is to ensure that they don't conflict with stability and growth in the candidate countries. And the second is that new members should not destabilize the Union. Now, I do have 3 suggestions that might do that, which might help in this context. One is, instead of setting the tests in absolute terms, maybe the tests should be set, the Maastricht criteria should be set in terms of the average of the Eurozone. In other words, one would just have to have inflation below the average of the zone, or the fiscal deficit below the average of the Eurozone member countries. that would at least still ensure that these countries enter the zone on the side of adding stability to the zone rather than subtracting it. Secondly, I think one might consider abandoning the independent exchange rate, the ERM2 target. Quite frankly, the other criteria, the ones for price stability, low interest rates, low fiscal debt and so on, are the sort of things which are designed to achieve stability either before or once you're in the Union. To add the extra test of exchange rate stability itself, we know creates all sorts of dangers, and I just wonder whether it might not be scrapped. And a final suggestion is, why not allow countries to adopt the euro when they choose, but to make the tests for being represented on the ECB, represented on the Council. Now, how would that work? It would mean that you may find that some smaller countries choose to adopt the euro, feeling that it doesn't really matter whether they're represented in the institution on the Council, being one voice in 20 there, or not. For the larger countries, where perhaps one might be more concerned about about a unilateral adoption of the euro before meeting the tests, I suspect the countries would prefer to meet the tests and join the institutional arrangements rather than just abandon an independent monetary policy. So I think actually on those suggestions, the various goals here would in fact be achieved. Anyway, that's all I have. Thank you very much.